So we're together with Gilbert and Alexander. Alexander is from PeaceTech Labs. They're going to introduce themselves. Gilbert is from Policy, and I'm from How to Build Up. We're going to be sharing how we do our work in PeaceTech. So what are the tools that we use in our work to actually do peace building, in our case digital, but in their case it's also digital and other. And then, so we're going to take a few minutes, 10 minutes each. I'm sorry, we promise we're not going to be boring, and to present to you our work. And then we have some questions prepared for, to make sure that we're critical of each other's initiatives, but also we want to maximize the time for questions and answers with all of you, because this is why we're here as well. So I will start. So Gilbert, do you want to say something? No? Okay. I think
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, so many buttons to click here and there. Hi, everyone. Gilbert Beyamba, Director of Programs at Policy. I'm here in Kampala and happy to share some of the work we're doing around PeaceTech, but mainly around online violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. Yeah? Double sound?
Yeah.
Okay. I turn it off when he speaks. Okay. Alex, do you want to say something?
Yeah. So I'm good on the mic, or
yeah.
I turn this.
One day talk that we need.
Got it. Okay. Yes, I'm Alex Young. I'm with PeaceTech Lab. I'm going to manage one of our hate speech programs there today that I'm going to discuss a little bit today. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about the low tech that's been discussed a little bit and how we've had some experience with it. And I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts because it seems to be a topic of interest. So,
yeah. Let's do it, shall we? Let's get to it. Hi, Sheldon. Okay, so my name is Christelle. I work with How to Build Up. I'm the digital research lead, and what that really means is I'm part of the group that designs methodologies for how to use ICTs or tools that we use online to extract data, analyze it, and visualize it, and also prevent conflict. One of the things we work on at Build Up is the Phoenix process. I'm sure most of you heard about it, and this is what we're going to go into today. The presentation that we prepared is a bit starting from scratch. Why do we need social media? So if you feel that it's a bit too basic, we can move faster. I'll also take a sense from all of you. So we'll start with the Phoenix process. First, I'd like to discuss with you why we do social media listening and why is it important today in our peace building efforts. What can we learn from social media? Is there something beyond the narrative? Is there something beyond sharing and likes? What does this tell us? And how can we listen to it? This is where we're going to present the Phoenix process. And finally, the ethics that we were discussing with Christine this morning as well. So why do we listen to social media? In our work, we all know that today, usually we use traditional research to go and assess what the situation is, right? Like we want to understand where the conflict is. We go interview people, do a few focus groups, maybe a participant observation, and then we develop our analysis and do the intervention. It's been 10 years, like Sheldon was saying yesterday, that it's been 10 years PeaceTech is becoming more and more important, no? And similarly, the digital space. The conversations that are happening online, if you remember, like 10 years ago, we used to say, oh, whatever, it's just people yelling at each other. That doesn't say anything, it's just an echo chamber. But today, they're so linked together to the extent that the online is becoming a reflection of the offline and the offline is becoming a reflection of the online. So in a sense, what we see online, the conversations we see online, they reflect the social fabric, they reflect the echo chambers on Sunday lunch when we're in our family and we all suddenly hate this race or whatever. It is an echo chamber, it's not the truth, but we get the impression that we're all talking the same thing. So why do we do social media listening? First, because we believe that the same stakeholders that act offline are today, and you said it yesterday as well, weaponizing our social media platforms to reflect the offline dynamics. And two, because we can identify triggers, you know, in the development world, we use the systematic approach to analyzing conflict, and we use something that's called KDF, key determining factors of conflict, right? Can't we use it for the online as well? Like, can't I look at a conversation and identify a key area where there's a trigger, where someone is intentionally creating a conflict? So why are we interested in listening to social media? At Build Up, our rationale was the corporate world and people, politicians with specific agendas, whether they're good or not, they can pay for our data. Now, the corporate world pays to buy our data that we don't even know it's being sold, to sell us things, to convince us of things, to change our behaviors, why can't we have access to this data to actually solve conflict? No? Why do they have access to create conflict, but we can't use it or have access to it unless we have the money to buy it to actually prevent conflict? So from this logic, we started at Build Up developing this as we need to create the balance between the power dynamics online. Today, we know who owns social media. Today, we know who's using our data, who's pushing for what. Where are we? We go and do protests offline and we are activists and so on. What's happening online? Are we creating that balance? Are we defending? Are we making sure conflict is not is not getting worse? So why? I just put a few thoughts this morning. So if Trump can do it to nurture polarization, we can do it to stop conflict. We all know the big data campaign that Trump launched to actually get votes. So why can't we use that same data, us, to reduce conflict? Social media reflects the complex and diverse fabric of society. And it's a powerful tool to really reduce harm. And we're gonna look at how. So what can we learn? Okay, actually, I will use this. As we were saying with the traditional research, we go and we see if in a conflict context, let's imagine that this is a conflict context. We go and see who are the people involved in this context, no? One, why are they fighting? What's the topic? What's the reason they're fighting against each other? Where are they fighting and in what form? And social media gives us the exact same answers, just in a different name. So instead of stakeholders, it's account names. Instead of the topic, it's the narrative. Instead of the weapons, it's the emotion that's being triggered, the polarization that's happening. So if we come and think about it from the traditional sense, and we want to look at social media, we see the posts can tell us the content, who's trying to push for what, and what's the stakeholder name or the account name. The comments, how are people reacting to this topic and this content, and how do they engage together? Are women being silenced? Are people who are anti-this being removed? Is there suddenly a robotic army of accounts that is suddenly on that post and commenting and creating this impression that we're all against this? And you mentioned yesterday with the misinformation, Sheldon, and also you, Lisa, with the it's a weapon. It's one of the biggest weapons. So how can we intercept this? How can we stand in the middle of this and use it for us? So from social media, we can learn who are the influencers, who are the most followed, who's following them. And for example, if I'm following Greg, and Greg is following Kamran, what's the relationship between me and Kamran? If Kamran doesn't speak Arabic, but I speak Arabic, but I follow him, what's the intention of me following him? I can't even understand his post. So all of this we can learn from just seeing the network graph, which we'll look at in a second, of how people follow each other and who they follow and when. When suddenly in Yemen, all of a sudden there were 10,000 accounts that were created overnight that all follow their pro group, a specific group. Suddenly, who's looking at this and who's using this data and who's telling people, be careful? This is intentional. So who are the influencers? Who are the followers? And what are the trending topics? What are the topics used to create this conflict, this polarization? Am I going too fast? Or it's, yeah? Just want to get to the Phoenix process. So how can we use it for peace building? I'll go to this. So as peace builders, when we look at the social media data, we can learn the narratives, the topics, the sentiment, the network, who's talking to who, and identify coordinated inauthentic behavior, which honestly in our work has proven so powerful to identify that actually this is an echo chamber. Actually, this happened overnight. Actually, this didn't exist. And I promise in conflict areas, we saw how much social media is being used to create even more polarization and more division. And as you said yesterday, someone, I'm sorry, I forgot who was saying about the images, the pictures, she's not with us, Elizabeth. Also the pictures, like suddenly you see pictures that are not true, they're not from the context, but suddenly everyone's using them. So all of this we can learn from looking at social media. So the ethics, before just we go into it, just to tell you how we use it at Build Up. One, we don't listen to conversations that are not public, even if we are part of the private group. Ever. We don't use data that is not public. So if you put your gender, but it's private, we never use it, even if you're my friend and I see it. We don't store data beyond the usage. We follow the GDPR policy of Europe, and we don't store data. We don't report ever. anything. It's not our job to report. Our job is to understand. Are you ready? I put this for you. It's supposed to do dum dum dum, but I don't know because it's PDF. He's supposed to have dum dum dum, but it's PDF. So imagine it's dum dum dum. So what is Phoenix? Phoenix is an open source, non-commercial, customizable process. It's a process because it's not just a tool. It is online, it's open source. Anyone can go get the code and build their own dashboard. This is not the problem. But we call it the Phoenix process because we like to accompany the local peace builders in identifying the problem statements, in looking and analyzing the social media conversations, and then designing interventions, and then evaluating their impact. Is the conversation changing online? Are people no longer commenting on that page? Did inauthentic behavior disappear? So this is the process, and we'll go into it in a second. So it's contextually grounded problem statements. We always work with researchers local from the country. So I will never go and do an analysis of social media in France, even if I live in France, but I don't know the context enough. But I would go to Lebanon and do the analysis in Lebanon because you absolutely need context knowledge to understand the narrative, how people are talking together. Is this a curse? Is this positive? Is it negative? You all know how it can change with the tone and how we talk to each other. So this is very important. We do the data pipeline that I'll show you in a second. We then customize the labeling model. So what we do is, let's say, Kamran wrote a post that says, I love pizza. And I did a like, and Greg did a share of that post, yeah? What we do is, we have Sheldon who came to us and said, I wanna use the Phoenix process to understand, do people like pizza? So then we say, okay, let's go and check. Pizza is a topic, no? So I want to teach the system to recognize that this topic, that this post is about pizza. What would I tell him to know? What would I tell the system to know if it's about pizza? The picture perhaps, but also like if I'm telling you I like pizza, do you know this is the topic about pizza? Yeah, you're sure, no? Why? Because there's the word pizza, no? So we teach the system to identify these words using NLP that you were discussing yesterday, to identify key terms that tell us the topic that's being discussed. This is a very complicated iterative process that goes back and forth. We test it with 1,000 posts, then we test it again. And it's very adapted to the country itself. So this is the topic labeling. And then we have the actor labeling. So for example, Kamran can be labeled as professor, you can be labeled as activist, I can be labeled as feminist. It depends on what we want to look at. What do we want to see? Maybe I don't care about if she's feminist or not. I just want to know if she's an activist or not. Or maybe I don't care. I want to know if she's an academic or a government official. So we label what we want to look at the data. This is why it's super tailored to the experts that are on the ground. And then the dashboard, and then the evidence-based interventions. So this is basically our stream of data. We take ACLED as well, because yesterday we mentioned ACLED. Christine, this ACLED, we use it to compare the online offline, because there's more and more evidence on how the online can pour into the offline, how a conversation online can lead to conflict offline and the other way around. So we use ACLED to compare these conversations. We take this data from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and now we're working on TikTok. It's raw, and then we organize it, we anonymize it, we classify all the data, and then we see it on the dashboard. Sorry. This is all the type of information that we can get. So we can we extract Facebook comments, Instagram posts, the posts from Facebook, YouTube videos, YouTube comments, as you can see, all of this data. So this I just talked about. I just want to show you. So why Phoenix? It's open source and it's non-commercial, it's customizable, and it's made by and for peace builders. It's the thing we're proudest of. So this is the dashboard. This is one of the pages of the dashboard. I'm gonna have to look at my laptop to show you. Okay, so for example, this is, I think, the UNDP Lebanon dashboard. So here you can see, after we train it and prepare it and everything, they get the dashboard and they see, this is the total number of Facebook. Obviously, you can see on the sidebar, no, up bar, something. You can control which year, which month, which topic, and which actor. So if I'm interested in knowing what are the conversations happening around gender in August 2022 in Lebanon, I can filter and only see that and be able to see who's the actor who's talking the most about it, who's pro, who's anti, who's instigating a positive or negative emotion. I think these are blurred on purpose. I didn't know they were blurred. But here are the account names. So top 5 Facebook pages by post. And all of this data alone, it's very indicative, but we usually really suggest that you compare them together and cross-tabulate the data together. So the top 5 poster, is it the same every month? Is it gaining traction? Are the number of followers increasing? What's the topic they talk about the most? And how do they talk about it? So you can also see the volume. Here you can see the topics. These are all classified. Oh no, it's not. This is Yemen. They were looking at the problem statement was how the religious identity is being used to divide people. So we created labels and topic classifications for each religious identity and tribe. And then we look at who's talking the most about this, in what way. For example, if someone is talking about identity, but they're from Turkey in the context of Yemen, what does this mean? If it's getting a lot of traction, what does this mean? So we see, for example, irrelevant, this you can unchoose in the list. So it's not usually you can filter out and you see the others. But we see that identity is really one of the biggest topics discussed on Facebook in Yemen. So here it's interesting to investigate. What do they talk when they talk about identity? Who's talking about identity? And it's the same for tweets. I'm sorry, I'm going through them quickly. Whoever's interested, we can talk more. So I don't want to take a lot of time. And then we look at the sentiment. So also this is using NLP, but also using the likes and the shares. So all of these variables are used together to tell us what's the sentiment that's being triggered. So here, for example, we can also see that in general, most of the posts were neutral. So it was just reporting. There wasn't pushing. It was just, there was a war here. Someone hit someone there. There wasn't, oh my God, look, someone hit someone there. Not that we're pro or anti, just to say the way we send the message. And then by sentiment, here we can see, for example, journalists, because it's blurred, create the most negative sentiment, or academics create the least negative. This is very useful when we see, for example, politicians create a lot of negative sentiment on issues related to identity. This is like, we know exactly what's going on. It's the politicians who are using this in their agenda. In Iraq and Kurdistan, we found that politicians use the topic of budgets alongside sectarian identities. And we saw how budget is used to divide the communities, the Iraqi and the Kurdish communities, because Kurdistan takes 12% of the national budget of Iraq. And every time there's an election, every time there's an economic crisis, every time there's a bomb, whatever, a politician is going to come and say, it's the 12% of the Kurdish. If they were taking it, we would have used it. And then polarization and then hate. So these are the places where we can see this. And then the topics. So what are the topics that are creating the most negative reaction or positive reaction or null? This is one of the tools that we are very, I want to say but we're all of us. It's word cloud. So what we do here is we show the peace builders what are the words that are most used together online. We feel that it's a very, very, very useful tool because, for example, you can't read Arabic, but imagine here it says Iran, murderer, corrupt, death penalty, Arab. Can you imagine what this tells us about the association of these words? That when people talk about Iran, they often talk about murderer. When they talk about Lebanon, they often talk about corruption. These association of words can also tell us a lot about how people are talking together online. And finally, the network graph. This network graph is from Tunisia. And the local peace builders in Tunisia wanted to see what is the divisive topic between the older generation and the younger generation. They found that there's a huge gap in communication between these two generations. So they said, how can we know what's dividing them? So we learned that football as a topic is what brings these two generations together. So now they're designing initiatives around football and like football news and stuff to bring people together. You can learn a lot from this. Bubli is the local peace builder we were working with. And here we can see that Bubli is here and the polarization is there. So people who follow Bubli don't see the polarization. So if they want to work on this, they need to target those, not their people. Does it make sense? Or for example, another Iraq and Kurdistan, just to tell you, we also found all Arabic speaking pages are here and all Kurdish speaking pages are here. And in the middle, there's 2 pages. One, it's called PeaceTech24. It's a media page, and another media page. And both create posts that can be polarizing. So who are we getting the news from, and how are we talking together? And this is what the network graph can show us. I need support. No, can't help. So this is the archetype supervisation. I feel like I want to leave it for the questions because we had we tried to, I'll show you the wheel very quickly, to make the work a bit more theoretical and share with the peace builders how can we identify polarization. So we divided it into basically 5 groups on the level of norms, attitude, affiliation, interaction, and interests. And we talk about how each of these can be used online, how polarization on identity can happen. Like for example, misinformation and disinformation, where does it fall into? And by using this wheel of signs of polarization, we also suggest interventions to. So yeah, I just want to show the last slide because it says thank you. Well, so yeah. So that's my part. I spoke very quickly, I'm sorry. Yallah, all yours. Go, Alex.
Gilbert next, right?
Ah, Gilbert, yeah, sorry. Gilbert, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
I need to give you, what do I give him? Manipulation.
You may have to help me move to the next slide.
With pleasure. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Gilbert here, policy based in Kampala. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to travel, but I've been following the discussions via Zoom. Yes, so I'm here to talk about some of the work we're doing around peace, or what internally we basically look at in terms of online safety, especially for women. We've done a couple of work, and what I want to share with you here is one of our tools that we have developed, which is a digital safety T. It's a simple gamified platform that helps women from Africa to keep safe online. If you could go on to the next slide. Try to zoom out so that everything can be seen properly on the screen. Perfect. So I'll speak about who policy is, and then I'll introduce you to the game, and then you'll get an opportunity to test the game. I'll have a URL on the slides, and then any other questions or feedback that you may have. Moving on to the next slide. Policy is a safe tech feminist organization based out of Kampala, Uganda, but working across sub-Saharan Africa. We've been in existence for the last 5 to 6 years. Most of our work is around the intersection of data design and technology, but also we do a lot of work on research and programming in terms of how emerging technologies are affecting our day-to-day lives, especially in a feminist lens, and how we can create a safe feminist internet while working around issues around data governance, artificial intelligence, and how we can develop inclusive approaches towards digital access within the global south. One of the works we have done has been around how do we make sure that women are safe online, and that's how we came up with a digital safety T game. If we could move on to the next slide. When we talk about digital security, I think I appreciated the first part of the conference where there was a lot of definition around PeaceTech, around different terminologies when it comes to peace and technology. And for us, we've mainly looked at it in the lens of online gender-based violence, looking at how women utilize online platforms. And some of the work we've done, for example, if you follow elections, there's always a lot of violence during elections. And one of the things that stood out in general elections in Uganda, we noticed there was a lot of online violence that was also offline violence that was also tech facilitated in terms of tracking women, but also looking at how women use these platforms. And we did a study which we called Amplified Abuse, where we looked at how women politicians were utilizing online platforms during the general elections. Some of the work that came out from there, we translated them into products. And one of the products has been the Dicto Safety game, where we designed the game to help women to really keep safe online. And we're doing the same study looking at the data from the Kenyan elections and how women politicians utilize online platforms, and that will be coming on sometime in the near future. When we look at why we created the game, so one of the things that we've learned from the work we have done, especially monitoring online platforms and looking at how there's a lot of increased violence on these platforms. We've seen that the spaces are no longer being safe, especially for women, but also we're seeing a lot of disinformation and misinformation, but also in terms of the violence, we're looking at reverse pornography. We're looking at a lot of body shaming, but also looking at how personal lives of women are being used against them or weaponized. So we've seen around, so for example, in one of the studies, we saw one women leader whose family and divorce processes were weaponized in terms of how she can't be a leader, and all this information was being put out on social media. The other bit why we came up with the game, at the end of the day, we want women to take up more spaces online, but also utilize these spaces and the opportunities that online spaces provide. So we felt like we need to provide a simplified tool to help them in the training process. It could be self-teaching, but also it could be in group discussions. So we felt like developing, gamifying, there's so many resources were developed into a game. And the other bit for us, basically, it's making sure that feminist individuals are able to self-defend, especially on online platforms. And the fact that we do a lot of capacity building for feminist grassroots organizations, and sometimes we're not able to reach them in terms of physical traveling to reach them. So developing this game so that they can self-teach and self-defend was really key for us in developing the game. Next slide. So when you look at the game, it's basically looking at 3 life experiences of African women. We have a student, we have a social worker, and we also have a business lady. And when you get onto the game, for example, when you look at the first woman who is a student, Gawach, who is a student in one of the African countries and utilizing online platform to do her own research, but also to socialize. If you could move on to the next slide. Yes, thank you very much. She uses the online platform to socialize, but also as a young person, a Gen Z or a millennial, she likes a soft life, she loves reading books, but also she utilizes a lot of online platform. The other character is Aisha, who is a social worker. She works for an NGO, and she works in the sexual reproductive health. She's a communication specialist, does a lot of her work on online when she develops her communication tools. She has to share some of her content online. And lastly, Dami, who is a business lady running an online shop in Lagos, utilizes the online platform to sell her products. When you look at these women, they're all relying on online platforms. And this also shows how our lives have moved on to online platforms. So when you play these games, the game is structured in a way that it starts from us understanding the digital challenges So we framed the game where you have the digital challenge, but it goes on to give you different scenarios in terms of how would this woman or this lady go about this challenge that she has faced online, and then goes ahead to give you the right response and resources. So we use a lot of storytelling scenarios in the game, but also help in defining different online threats, but also provide a lot of digital security resources, especially for women, feminist leaders, but also the platform also provides the opportunity that we have been able to translate this platform into local languages, which helps us also bring in the context issue here. We've developed the game in the sense that we also contextualize this, the challenges that women face online while utilizing or navigating these online spaces. If you could go on to the next slide, please. Yes, so that's the URL for the game. It's optimized for any platform, be it mobile, be it web, or a tablet, depending on which gadget you're using. So it's called Digital Safety Tea. So digital safety and tea in terms of drinking tea or coffee. So it's very easy, like I've mentioned, to navigate. Feel free to log on and explore the game and see how we have designed it. The last bit is basically, if you could move on to the last slide. Basically, after you've experienced the game, I would love to hear from you. What do you think about the game? What can we do to improve the game, or what didn't you like about the game? I would love to hear that feedback. You can share in the chat bot or in the chat of Zoom, or if at one point the mics will be open, you can ask any questions. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gilbert. Thanks a lot. Alex, are you ready? This is Gilbert's email if you
Or to the main room.
Okay.
I mean, like I say.
Sure. This? Here we are. Great. It's nice to see everybody. It's nice to be in person. Thank you. Can everybody see the slides okay? Should I zoom in a little bit? There we go. So I'm inspired by the work that's already been presented on. And before we, when we were putting this session together, we wanted to all take a different angle at things with build up kind of having a very leveraging it pretty advanced technology. And then hearing Gilbert talk about gamifying some of this stuff. And kind of like it's been discussed already in this conference, we wanted to, from PeaceTech Lab, we wanted to discuss kind of low tech. And it's some of the programming that we've been doing the past few years. We certainly have had our hand in some of the more advanced leveraging more advanced technologies like our COVID violence database, where we aggregated lots of data to see where the hotspots for violence during the COVID era were happening, and then therefore drawing assessments on if they were as a result of violence. A lot of this came into play with anti-Asian hate crimes. But also, many of you may be familiar with our accelerator, where we host PeaceTech startups, both for-profit and nonprofit companies, and really help them develop their apps. But in the past few years, we've been talking a lot about this low tech question. And we've conducted some programming that really leverages some of the tools that lots of us already know how to operate, but others may want to use in their work to amplify. So the key question that guided us through this process is, how can low tech, which is available to nearly everyone, be used for PeaceTech? Specifically, who would those people be? Who would those peace builders be? So going back to basics. What's that? Yeah, okay. There's a segment of the peace building and social good community that are not seeking to learn how to code or develop their own app. There's a section of the peace building community that has been working in their fields for decades, and they do it very well, but they're looking to see how technology can amplify their current work. This community tends to be local activists, local civil society organizations, and community leaders who are already experts in economic justice, criminal justice reform, gender equality, that type of work. But by no means would they call themselves tech savvy. And I can relate to that at various times. And it's completely okay that they would not identify as being tech savvy, because like we said, like we all are aware, there's a whole suite of tools that we can use to amplify their work. So in discussing with them over the years, they've told us that the main challenges to leveraging more sophisticated tools and data are lack of technical expertise, time and personnel, so kind of that capacity, as well as a reliable network or internet access. They don't see changes to these obstacles. At the end of the day, their day job is to work on the issues at hand that they're working on. So enter low tech, or basic and rudimentary types of technologies. In polling them, so across 6 years of programming that we've done, leveraging this low tech, easy to use tools, and polling them on tools that they would be most interested in, from data visualization to web design to gamifying, like Gilbert was talking about. The most highly sought after skills relate to tech that tells a story. It relates to collecting data that they can use to back up the work that they're doing, that they know to be true, but they need to message that appropriately. So it's collecting the data, but also analyzing it and visualizing it, creating media, and then communicating that via social media. And then interestingly, and I believe Helena mentioned this yesterday, on the international front, for organizations we had worked with internationally, there's an ask for communication apps. I believe we talked yesterday about how WhatsApp is one of the more suitable tools for that. So that's how we really get to that low tech question. So knowing this, we sought out to create a learning environment in which that fills each of these needs. So each of the programs that we conduct, whether it's in the US with our Road to Equal Justice program, our PeaceTech exchanges, which we've been doing for about 6 years, or our Countering Hate Speech program, which we're doing currently. We sought to create multi-day training programs that we tailored to participants' respective needs as they had reported to us prior to beginning it. And we wanted to focus it also on the issues that we knew that they were working on. So instead of kind of being puppet master, we get local trainers who already know the tech, who already know the local issues that are being tackled by these organizations. And we have them conduct the trainings, the facilitations, and the strategy sessions. It's a side benefit to it all. The networking has consistently been an aspect of these trainings that people look for. And while that was not necessarily a main priority, that has come to be a main priority because we've learned that over time. So one example of these programs, and I'm very intentionally talking about our US program, the Road to Equal Justice program, because we have found that this type of programming is effective internationally in conflict zones, as well as in the United States, or in the West, as we might call it. We took what we had learned and practiced through PeaceTech exchanges and our Countering Hate Speech program and implemented it back home. And we launched it in the summer, the Road to Equal Justice program, we launched it in the summer of 2020, when racial disparities and that discussion was very pronounced in the United States. And it became a global phenomenon around that time. And so we sought to participate to bring in organizations that were working in the racial and social justice space. We conducted them in cities across the United States, from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, to Louisville, to Dearborn, Michigan, which has the highest Arab American population in the United States, to New Orleans. And in all, through this training, we've trained 448 people from 243 organizations. And every one of these organizations is working locally. They know their issue area and they can be very effective at it. And the idea is that this basic technology, which thereafter will help amplify their work. So the case study I'm going to talk about is our New Orleans case. There were 39 participants in 28 organizations. And when we discussed with them ahead of time, their top tech needs, similar to, as I mentioned earlier, were survey and data collection tools. They wanted better data. And one of the reasons for this was maybe the data didn't exist, but also maybe there wasn't a trust in the data that was open source or out there, whether it was coming from the government or whether it was privately sourced. People didn't quite trust the data. And that was a time when these programs were going on. It was a time when there was a lot of mistrust, and there still is. They really wanted data analysis and visualization, social media tools and strategies. So for example, one organization on a kind of more basic level, they came to this training with a desire to gather and leverage data related to statewide arrests in Louisiana, a conviction, and data related to their release from prison. And so this data is generally publicly available in some capacities, but this organization wanted to create it a bit more organically for themselves. And kind of on a more advanced side, another organization called Kingsley House, who work on economic security for children, families, and the broader community. They wanted to demonstrate kind of the interconnectedness of all of the issues that they work on, be it from Head Start education to workforce development to houselessness. And they wanted to demonstrate that interconnectedness in a more digestible way for the broader public so that they could really hone their, really demonstrate their mission. Similar to how I mentioned before, the key challenges they noted were they were worried about the expense of types of technologies that would amplify their work. They were worried that it would, yours is good, this one's not. That was my last slide anyway. So there we go. And they were worried that it would be difficult to learn. And they were worried that it would be hard to find talent that could do this. So when I read these pre-program surveys, I'm thinking, okay, they have a misconception about what type of technology is necessary. That you don't have to learn how to leverage, create an app to really make your work much better. You just can go to the basic level. That's what we did with this program. We brought in local techies, local peace builders to discuss data analysis, visualization strategies, media and social media strategies. But also as a part of this, because they're so basic, we don't spend several days just teaching something that is pretty intuitive. Talk about the methods in which you can use these tools, more strategic ways. So for example, we had someone from Hootsuite come, a social media tool, and talk about strategies to use this in a more effective manner. Also crafting an effective message. We had someone come who generally works in for-profit, but he came to discuss how to, once you have the data, once you have the visualizations, how can you really craft a message that resonates with the audiences that you're trying to connect with. And so broadly through our Road to Equal Justice programs, participants have found them extremely useful. Above 80% say that they take them back to their organizations, their communities, and they're able to develop their work. So to end on, just to back up, about one of our, not related directly to Road to Equal Justice, but one of the better examples of this being a success story of very rudimentary types of technologies is a man from about 8 years ago. He, using a very basic app, I think it was called Teleprompter at the time. So essentially he was able to create media, journalistic media, focused on the extinction of crops in a community in Iraq. And he was able to take the videos, take the interviews, edit them on the phone, as well as publish them. in so sophisticated a manner that it won awards. And it was able to make impact just from being on its phone. And so we would do well to remind ourselves that we don't necessarily have to go above and beyond, or we don't have to become intimidated about ourselves. And I've certainly fallen into this misconception in the past too, where I think that I must develop a very complicated app. But when we make it more accessible, we empower many more people to engage in PeaceTech. So I'll end there.
Thank you, Alex.
It's about 20 minutes left.
Yeah. I think it's better to not ask each other. We had prepared questions for each other, but I think we spoke a lot. Anyone has reflections, feedback, thoughts, questions, jokes, stories, anything? Tell us things. Yes. Yeah, go for it.
Do I need to turn this on?
Yeah, I think so. The others. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, thank you all. I didn't know about these tools. So then I have one question in terms of build up for emotional intelligence, because I saw that you are doing this content analysis, sentiment analysis. So I don't know if you are working on this idea of like building up on emotional intelligence and maybe connecting with other dots, because what you're doing is basically conflict mapping on social media. So I wonder if you are doing that. And then a comment for Alex on your idea of, okay, let's do low tech. And we have an experience. I've been working with UNESCO on training of journalists in Central America. And one of the projects, we said, like, we're going to use WhatsApp to communicate and create a network. And they were so scared. Like, how are you going to use WhatsApp? This is not safe. Like, why? Like, you have to really have a good reason. And I was like, that curve, they already know that tool. They are already using, they already know what they can share and what they cannot share. So I will go with that one instead of using any other app that it will be more safe, because I don't want to have that learning curve. So sometimes donors are asking things that are not for that group. So thank you for saying that, because I have seen that in my work that, yeah, we need to protect journalists. Yes, we need to train them to do better stuff. But at the same time, that learning curve is so high that it's like, it will take part of the whole project just to teach them how to use these other things. So thank you for saying that.
Right, the mic is on, I'll just grab it. Thank you very much. That was amazing to hear those two case studies. I mean, what I would like to address first, possibly, is the Build Up platform. And I was wondering, what other similar platforms are there? Is it quite a crowded field? And what is specific to the fact that this is geared towards peacemakers? So it uses NLP, natural language processing. I'd be curious to hear about the weaknesses of that tool. You know, where does it fall short, and how you are dealing with that, and maybe just a few points on the common elements of data that emerge from NLP that you realize perhaps are distorted, and how you factor that into your overall picture of the results that come through. I think listening to all of this, you know, something in the back of my mind is, you know, is a lot of people for influence and power are gaming these platforms, and there is the risk that you're tracking narcissists on these platforms, and how do you manage that? And you know, what should we do there? I mean, I don't think there's any easy answers to these, but just what is the thinking at the moment? Thanks.
Thanks. Really loved the presentations. Really helpful. Thank you. In ways, my one was sort of how can we use this? So I was just curious, how does it work to link into Phoenix and use it? And then I had a second question that is a bit like the one just asked, which was, I suppose, we were really aware from different data. I wondered, do you collect background data on how much of the population is accessing it? Because I suppose there's always that dark figure of who, you know, men having smartphones more than women and this sort of thing. So I wondered, is that a way maybe of accounting of which bit of the population is on the social media and how relevant that is? Because it would, I imagine, really vary from country to country. And then maybe on the build up presentation, it'd be brilliant to get a little bit more of a sense again, sort of how can we use it? Because you know, on my team, I've realized we can't all turn into things. And when you're talking about low tech, is that like, you know, and is that sort of a Word document, or is it like low code things, or both? And it'd be brilliant to maybe get some examples, or I don't know, share them more. And I suppose just wondering, those sorts of training materials that you both have, like, can we all go on your platforms and use them? So yeah, it's a sort of how do we use it all question to both of you. And I really loved the game, thanks. I think need to do more games. I don't have a question on it, but I'm definitely going to go on and play it.
Okay, sure. I'm Cameron. I'm a head of human rights at Wikimedia and a professor at Central European University and co-founded Access Now. I had a question for Gilbert. Have you thought about expanding your game into covering digital security for LGBTQ plus community in Africa? Just would wonder if you're also thinking of other groups beyond that, because it's a great idea, I think very useful, and would love to speak with you about it after the conference.
I'm Paul Heiderbrecht from the University of Waterloo in Canada. Yeah, so really appreciate all of these presentations. I'm struck by how in one of the framing documents that was shared in advance of the conference, it was the articulation of PeaceTech focused on the strategic use of technology as being the defining factor. It's, you know, peace builders using technology in a strategic way, not simply an instrumental way. But I'm struck, Alexander, hearing from the work that the PeaceTech Lab was doing with organizations at how rarely any organization, frankly, in our technological age, thinks strategically about all the technology we use, whether it's low or high tech. And in fact, that even, you know, framing conversations around what is the objective, what are the best tools to be, you know, achieving mission, you know, facilitating a conversation like that actually is talking about technology in a strategic way. And it's so rare. Like, I'm thinking about this. My university is just, for the first time that I ever recall being a part of a lot of other kinds of organizations, NGOs, academic institutions, is having had a consultant come in and talk not about, you know, what's the next tool we should use or how to use this or that more effectively, but talking about facilitating conversations about our strategic use of technology. And so even in that context, I mean, it's just so rare and so useful and profoundly influencing, I think, how we're thinking about both the mundane and what are the advances. So anyway, for me, that was just kind of really eye-opening to think about that. And particularly for thinking about, I mean, tech isn't just the stuff, but we're talking about techno-social realities. That the capacity and the ability to use technology is just as crucial as what the widget might be. So anyway, just word of appreciation, not really a question, but yeah, really helpful.
Hi, I'm Lucia from the Global PeaceTech. This is a question for you, Christelle. Going to the basic, and at the beginning of your presentation, you were speaking about social media, kind of a mirror of the conversations happening in the analog world. And I was wondering if that is really the case, because we know that many conversations are being amplified and many other conversations happening offline are just not made visible. So just problematizing a bit that. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with the strategic question. And it's, when we think of technology as a solution, we jump right into it and don't think about, well, not even what type of tool to use, but is technology even the best solution here? Is it necessary to go after what we're going after? Yeah, so yeah, thank you for that comment. And the examples of low tech, yeah, it is. I think there is an intentionality behind how broadly defined it is. That it could be anything like a Word document to kind of low code type things. Oftentimes in our trainings, what we'll use is apps that are already developed but are pretty easy to use, like the app CrowdTangle, where you can essentially track. If you have a URL that's been quite popular, you can kind of see who are the biggest influencers, who's tweeting about it the most, and you can pin down a little bit, because then you can see if it's being endorsed by legitimate actors, if they have a history of misinformation, that type of stuff. Or there's another one called, I think it's called Trends Map, where you can see the most popular hashtags happening in the world, and you can go a bit more local. So say during an election, you can see kind of where what's being discussed in a given community much easier. So that type of stuff, when you add the expertise of the local peace builder, that stuff can go really far. Did I miss one? Hmm?
Your question about
It was a comment. Yeah, it was a great comment. Yeah.
Just like in case you want to say something.
Yeah, I'll kick it back to you.
That we do, okay, so that makes more sense. One of the partners we work with is UNDP Lebanon. 3 years ago, they came to us and they said, we want to understand how people are talking about Syrian refugees in Lebanon and how is this leading to conflict. This was actually one of the first projects that inspired us to develop this tool, because we found we need to take ownership of how we categorize and label. And I'll take a second to answer your question on other tools. Of course, there are so many tools. I think the difference here is it's open source, so anyone can use it without us. 2, it's non-commercial, we don't intend to make money out of it. And 3, it's tailored. So it's not, the tool does not give you the results, you teach it. So it's more work on your end to see the results than just get the results and then do the work, kind of. So what happened is UNDP came and told us we want to understand this. So the first thing we do usually in the Phoenix process is we say, okay, who do you think is talking about this topic? So they want to understand the relationship or the dynamics between host communities and refugee communities, okay? So we say, okay, dear researchers at UNDP, do you know who are these accounts that are talking about this? Personal knowledge, there are researchers that are local, they say, yeah, I know this political leader from this right-wing group, I know this Syrian refugee who's very anti-Lebanese, whatever. We take this information, but not only that. So what we do is we go on, Facebook has a platform that's called CrowdTangle. I'm sure you all know it. If not, it's super cool. CrowdTangle, it's dying soon, they're gonna shut it down. CrowdTangle allows you to research data on Facebook. So what we go and search, we change the parameters to say in Lebanon, the region, or in Arabic or in English, who is using the word Syrian, for example. And you get all of the people talking about Syria, all of the pages. And then we have the tool that's developed to help the researchers. And then you take each account and you say, does it have a lot of followers? Is it following others? Is it hateful? Is it pushing for an agenda? There's a lot of criteria. And then you develop your list of data sources, which is how we identify the stakeholders. So we end up with UNDP, for example, we have like 240 pages on Facebook that we follow. We have Twitter, YouTube, but I'm just going to take it. And one of the limitations of this process is that we see 2% of what's happening online. We cannot look at all the conversations, yeah? So we know that this is a limitation. And the idea is not to say 90% of people are I don't know what. The idea is to say whenever this topic is mentioned, there's a sentiment that people are anti. So if you care about host and refugee community relations, this is what you need to work on, this topic or this sentiment or with this stakeholder. So one of the limitations is we know the data is not perfect and it's not comprehensive. And two, we also know that when we get these stakeholders, the 240 on Facebook, and we want to label them, so we want to tell them, this is a politician, this is academic, depends on what they're looking at. It's never the perfect classifier because it's tailored to the actual research. They decide what they want to learn or teach the system. So it's never the perfect classifier, but we have found that automating the classification is really helpful in our field as peace builders, because we cannot manually and qualitatively analyze thousands of posts. So how can we group them under topics? This is the most challenging phase of the entire process, in our opinion, because it's a lot of iterations and reading and identifying key terms and so on. This is another one of the challenges. So we take these data sources, and then with the local researchers, we get all the posts from these data sources in last month, for example. And then we help the researchers at UNDP see the common topics. So they develop the first iteration of topics. Let's say it's 100 topics. They start with economic crisis, cholera pandemic, COVID pandemic, whatever. We teach the system that when you see COVID, label it as COVID. When you see corona, label it as COVID. When you see, I don't know, vaccination, label it as COVID within the context. But then next month, we'll do, next week, we do another 1,000 posts based on the labeling that we just did. And then we see actually cholera, COVID, and disease can be combined under public health. Because there's no interest in looking at COVID alone, because I want to look at Syrian refugee and host community tensions, but I still want to see how COVID is being used and disease is being used as anti. So then I do another iteration and I fix my data and I combine. So then we have the topics, and then we go to the sentiment analysis. The sentiment analysis is a combination of emotional intelligence. So looking at the actual language, there are so many groups. One of them is because we collaborate with them on their model, specifically the Qatar University. They developed a way to identify if the language that's being used is aggressive, empathetic, or sympathetic, or something like this. We inspired our model from theirs. We don't use it because it's only for Arabic. So this, with the how many shares, how many likes, and the qualitative knowledge of the researcher who helps the system learn that this was anti, this was pro, and this was so on. So then we get to see the dashboard, and how is this useful for peace builders. So for example, in the case of UNDP, what they did is last year when there was 2 years ago, there was the Syrian elections, presidential elections that took place in embassies around the world, because in Syria, and there was in Syria as well, but the refugees around the world. One of them was organized in Lebanon. Unfortunately, it was a complete chaos. Obviously, people are like, if you want to vote for Bashar al-Assad, go back to your country. Why are you here? All the media agencies used this to really polarize people. So what UNDP did is they used the trends and who's talking about elections and who's pushing for anti-Bashar al-Assad and so on to identify warnings of possible conflicts that can happen offline. And they took those and they gave them to the Ministry of Interior, and they were able to stop a lot of conflicts that were going to happen because they started lobbying for them online. Which takes me to your question. Is it 100% a reflection of the offline conversation? Of course not. But does it reflect how we talk to each other offline? We believe yes. Does it reflect the same power dynamics of our women talking online? Are they being silenced? Are the people who are differently abled being able to talk? What if he can't type? What if they don't have access to the internet? So all of these you can see online, but also you have to include the context specificities in your analysis. This is why at the start of the presentation, we said it's very important that the researcher is local, knows the context. We cannot be external and go analyze. It has to be someone who knows these pages, knows what their view is, knows that Christelle is lying when she says she loves refugees because 1 year ago she did a statement and she said no, she doesn't. Like, they need to know the context to know who's with who. Yeah. So then they took this data, they analyze it. In UNDP's case, they report to the Ministry of Interior because they should, their bureaucracy forces it. But for example, in Iraq and Kurdistan, what they did, there were 3 local organizations. They collaborated together. One of them is worked on recreating a sense of identity, national identity for Iraqis and Kurdish people using the monuments of the country. So they did like so many videos of going to this temple of this religion, to this church of that religion, and translated it in both languages and had people from different communities explaining the other person's religion. Another group worked with media influencers and journalists on how you frame your message in a way that can create division or not, and how whenever you put polarization, whenever you put the budget with an image of the flag of Kurdistan, even if someone doesn't go and read the article, the impression is, Kurdish people and their use of our budget. So how this plays a role as well. And the third group worked on doing a lot of campaigns. I love this initiative because really it's very intentional how it's used. Like, for example, there was a football game and the journalist reporting on who won put the picture of a very divisive figure in the country, irrelevant to the football game, irrelevant completely. It's a clickbait. So what they do is, this third initiative, they take this momentarily on the spot and immediately launch a video, small video saying, this is false, this was done for this person is divisive and it was only used to create polarization within your groups. This post is about football, it shouldn't be here. So like, this is the kind of intervention. What's useful with Phoenix is at the end, you can re-download the new set of data and see if this changed and continue. So I don't know if this helped clarify a bit more the process, but essentially, yeah, this is how it works. Do you feel like I covered the questions or did I miss something? Limitations, accounts identified, how can we use Phoenix, and relevance of who's online, as well as you said. So it depends on the context and it's included in the analysis. How do you feel? Do you feel like I answered the questions?
Elena online is asking if you also look at Twitter.
My Elena?
Elena. No, I don't think it's your Elena.
Our Elena? Okay, yes, so Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. TikTok recently, yeah, that's just the other three, yes.
And just possibly one word on NLP. So yeah. NLP, is it evolving a lot? Is it getting better, you find? So the results you're getting are more accurate?
Yes, so our partners, Data Value People, I think I said it, no, did I miss it? Did I miss saying data? Okay, Data Value People are our scientists, the data engineers who built the platform with Elena and Caleb in our team who are tech people. And I'm the researcher. So together we're like taking the brain of the researcher and they code it to turn it into a platform, kind of to analyze it. We're now at the third version of Phoenix, already 3 years. It's already been deployed in more than 30 countries. We have Kurdish, Swahili, Arabic, Arabizi, and English and colloquial English. With all of these iterations, it keeps getting better. And also how we teach the system is getting better. Like at the start, we were like, yeah, get all the key features using NLP to tell the system how to identify the topic. Now it's more avoid these words, focus on this type of words. And so we're getting better, the system's getting better, and Peace is getting better. So yeah, shall we go back?
I think there was a question for Gilbert.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Gilbert, go for it.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I think the question was around having a game for LGBTI community. This is a funny part of the conversation. We are currently running a program where we are supporting the LGBTI community in terms of how to utilize data for advocacy. And when I interacted with Christine when we were doing preps for the session, I learned about her colleague, Caleb, who is interested in collaborating with us. So that's part of the discussion we're going to be having in terms of transforming some of the data we have gotten, interacting with the LGBTI community, especially in Uganda, to see how we can build some products there. But I'm happy to discuss with you in case you're interested in collaborating, transforming some of the data into a game like this for the LGBTI community, but also it will be safe to also mention we need to look at the context. For example, one of the project we're currently running, at one point we had to even put work on hold because of the sensitivity of the topic and putting into the security of the organizations from the LGBTI community that we're working with. But we've learned a lot implementing this project. And I think one of the the product we're trying to put out is a data collaborative platform. But I'm happy to speak with you to see how we can also expand and maybe turn into a game. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. I'll just add one thought on do we use similar platforms for CrowdTangle for non-meta social media? To be honest, I'm not the one who can answer this question, so I'll take it right to your email in the chat and I'll tell you. But I know that there's no outside meta social media platforms. Is there something I'm mistaken? Yeah, TikTok. I would ask data value people and I can let you know. But I'll tell you the comments we can't get unless we manually download them, and that's we're creating an automated way to download them now. I was writing also to keep in mind that we use CrowdTangle to identify data sources and not to do any analysis. So it's really just to know who's talking about which topic using keyword search. And yeah, thank you, Elena, for your questions.